Neil, I was telling Tara that when I rewatched the movie, I realized that I take all my hair from Rose, but I'm just Rose. She's I'm like, I want to be Rose, except for the guy.
Neil, do you remember one time we were on the set and they had a completely different wig on Joanna? It was like this slightly asymmetrical, dramatic bob.
We appreciate you joining us. It's going to be a really fun talk. We do these pretty much every week, so check our events page to find the upcoming events. We have a horror and color panel next week talking about diversity behind the camera in the horror genre. And we have a couple of producers the week after that. And we have a third Thursdays the week after that. There's a lot going on. So check it out. And be kind to yourself. Stay safe. Give yourself some grace and space for what you need during this time. And have a great weekend.
We are super excited to be talking with the original writers and the new writer of Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. We have Neil Landau, Tara Eisen, and Chuck Hayward. How are you guys?
Right.
Good.
Awesome. Good. And I say guys, but I say, how are you all? I guess guys isn't good anymore.
No. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. Yeah, we were thrilled about Chuck, and we're thrilled about the remake, and we're thrilled you invited us, and thank you.
Yes. Amazing. If you guys have not seen this movie recently, you need to watch it again. It still stands up. I watched it on, I think it's on is it on Amazon and Hulu? I watched it on, I bought it on iTunes. So I'm not sure where else to see it. HBO Max. Gotta watch it. It's like, it still gives me all the feels. Okay, so we're gonna start with intros for each of you. And I really don't like reading bios. So I'm going to do just like a Cliff's Notes version for each of you guys. And then if you guys want to say anything about what you're currently doing, then I welcome that. If not, we will just move into some fun questions. First, we have Neil Landau. He is an award-winning screenwriter, producer, author, and screenwriting professor. His screen credits include Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, Melrose Place, The Magnificent Seven, Doogie Howser, MD, The Secret World of Alex Max, Twice in a Lifetime, MTV's Undressed, and animated movie projects including Tad the Lost Explorer, and we can go to IMDb and look at the rest of your credits. You're also, you also have books. You were an assistant dean at UCLA School of Theater and Film and Television and co-director of UCLA's MFA screenwriting program. I mean, you're all of it. And then we have Tara Eisen. She's also writer of the original Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead and an award-winning novelist, essayist, short story writer, and professor. She has 3 novels and I'm going to go down, and many short stories, essays, poetry. Check her out to read all of her stuff. And we also have Chuck Hayward, who writes things. That's what Chuck says in his bio. He was on Netflix's Dear White People, Disney's WandaVision, ABC's Mixed-ish, and he is the new writer of the reboot of Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. I don't know if the title's the same, but
it will be. Yes, indeed.
Oh, awesome.
We definitely want to keep the title. It says it all, you know?
Yeah. It's a pretty epic title, and I'm going to get to asking the question about that title. But first, we're going to do a couple icebreaker questions. So I'm just going to go in order. I'm going to do Neil, Tara, Chuck. What are you guys watching right now? Movies or TV? What are you guys watching?
Well, I just finished watching The Great on Hulu, which is a revisionist history.
Right.
Love that. I'm almost at the end of the final season of Schitt's Creek, which I came to it late, but I love it. And I was very happy to see all the Emmy recognition that it got. So I could give you a very long list, but those are the 2 things I'm watching or just finished watching and I'm watching right now.
Good choices. Tara.
I mean, the answer to what are you watching right now, I feel like is just everything. I'm spending way too much time watching shows. I agree with Neil. I just finished The Great and loved it. Mrs. America with Kate Blanchett on Hulu, I thought was really outstanding. I thought The Plot Against America didn't get the attention I thought it deserved. I was late to Schitt's Creek, but it was a bumpy start for me, but it got me. And then the other thing I binged recently, I hope I'm not pandering, but I did watch all of Dear White People, and it's outstanding.
Pander on, please pander on.
It's brilliant. It's amazing. I mean, it should be required viewing, and I can't wait for the 4th season to start.
Oh, thank you.
Nice. And Chuck?
I just finished Vita on Stars, which is it's exceptional. I mean, I wouldn't watch it with don't watch it with your family. There's some sex scenes in there that might be a little awkward, but it's so well written, so well acted. It's just something you don't see on TV all the time. Like Latinx characters, just in slice of life. Like really, it's awesome from top to bottom. I was a little late to this party, but I finished Watchmen recently, and
oh my God,
it knocked me on my ass. Like one of the most unpredictable shows I've ever seen in my life. I had no idea what was coming next. Also superbly acted from every single person. The writing it blew my mind. Kind of like nothing since like The Matrix or like some of Chris Nolan's movies. It's that level of brain tease. And yesterday I watched a little marathon of Below Deck Mediterranean, which is super fun. I do enjoy the high seas, and I do enjoy a little bickering amongst coworkers. So it was all.
Thank you for including the guilty pleasure Bravo shows, because I get sucked right in, and I'm not going to apologize about it. What film or TV show from when you guys were younger was the one that made you want to make television or movies?
That's a really tough question, but for me, I would say The Graduate, Mike Nichols. He just did so many interesting things that I'd never seen before. Just even like when Benjamin jumps in the pool and the camera goes underwater. And I think it's one of the best movie climaxes, and I love the Simon and Garfunkel soundtrack. So that's the one that came to mind.
Nice.
I'm going to go with Paper Moon. Which really
did.
affected me strongly. I think I'm exactly the same age as Tatum O'Neal, so I was 9 years old probably when I saw it for the first time. She was 9 years old when she was starring in it. Peter Bogdanovich, screenplay by Alvin Sargent, adapted from a novel. And I think what hit me about it so much was here was this 9-year-old girl carrying the movie. It's her movie. And she carries it not by being cute or likable or being the good girl, but she is smarter than anyone else in the room. She is a worthy adversary to this grown-up man, she's traveling around with. And the respect with which the character was developed for me, the respect for the character that the director showed, the writer showed, and that Tatum O'Neal brought to the role, to have such an incredibly realized 9-year-old little girl carry this story really, really affected me. I mean, it affected me as a person, but I think it also affected me as a storyteller.
I need to rewatch that. Chuck.
Yeah, mine were, I'll do a TV and feature. Feature-wise, it was Airplane and then like The Naked Gun, like all those Zucker brothers. There was something about like the laughs per minute that those movies contained. It was just like that. Those are goals for my career. I'd love to make something that funny, because just like if you're having a shitty day and you ever put on that movie, it just, your spirits are instantly lifted. So I'm sorry, those movies. And it's just like good escapist fun, but it's smart. And it's one of those things that when you watch a couple times, you find so many things that you've laughed over before. And to me, that's also the mark of great comedy. And then also like Norman Lear's shows, all his shows from the late 70s were like, they were so perfect because they were funny, they were character driven, which wasn't necessarily, commonplace then. And they were also very socially conscious. They spoke very honestly about what was going on in America at the moment, and it exposed a lot of America to parts of America that they didn't have access to otherwise. And it in a time when all the rest of TV was really sanitized, it was, grimy. It had edges. And so to me, that was like, okay, that's the line you want to walk of like, so deep, but still funny, that people can't really look away. So that's sort of what framed my sense of it.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm just going to start diving into, we're going to start talking about Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. Neil and Tara, when you guys first started writing this movie, can you talk about the beginning process of this? How did you guys come up with this idea? How did it start to evolve? Just, can you talk about the beginning phases?
Sure. I can tell you sort of the initial spark, and then Tara and I had already been writing together for a while, so it was our third screenplay. The first one was really...
We met when we were 12. I want to throw that out there.
Whoa!
We knew each other really, really well.
We were 9, and we met during Paper Moon. Anyway, I think we were influenced by Big and Risky Business, and the original notion was there were all these movies where the parents go out of town and the kids kind of devolve and wild and crazy. And so the original spark was just, what if the parent, in this case, the single mom, goes away, and the kids become responsible? It was just flipping it. And a lot of it was coming, which I don't think we realized very consciously at the time, the way we do now, probably because we teach now. It was actually coming from a very personal place, which is where I think really the best storytelling comes from. And so we could really relate a lot to primarily being raised by single moms. And I mean, I can speak for myself. And my brother was, he's not doing it anymore, so I'm not incriminating him, but my brother was a drug dealer and selling weed out of the house. And I grew up in a kind of a Cheech and Chong movie in a way, because my brother's older, and anytime he drove me anywhere, the car was filled with bong smoke. And so Kenny was very much based on that. So we had that, and then we started to talk about it and thought, well, maybe this is not interesting enough, and what's going to really grab people? And we started to brainstorm, and I don't remember where we came up with it, but Tara really, what I remember is that we talked about, what if she has to get a job? And because we always looked so much younger than we were, I think we said, what if she pretends to be older to get a job? I think that was our what if, that when we married those two things together, and we were like, oh, I think this is really good, and we were excited about writing it. Tara?
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think we also, it was a couple years after high school. We started writing it, I think I was in my junior year of college. Neil was a year ahead of me. And one day, we were driving past our old high school, and we were amazed at how mature everybody looked, especially the girls, the 16, 17-year-old girls. They looked older than I did at that time. And so I think we were also really interested in the idea of, the teenager always wants all of what looks like the freedom of being an adult, but isn't ready to be an adult.
Yeah.
And what if that freedom was handed to her, but she learned what that freedom, the price that she had to pay for passing herself off as an adult woman.
Right.
And it sort of came together. It sort of came together that way. Like Neil said, it was our third script. We had written 2 more nights and weekends when we were both in college.
How long did it take you guys to write this?
A lot of nights and a lot of weekends. I don't remember.
We used to outline our scripts before we would write them, and we put them on index cards. And I spoke to Tara earlier today, and I just said the one thing that I do remember very clearly was that the last scene card of the movie was always, it never changed, was always the mom. Once the audience totally forgot that there even was a babysitter, the last card said, "Where's the babysitter?" And that never changed. We rewrote probably every page many times for various reasons, but the end, that last line never changed. And for people who have seen the movie, which is everybody on this Zoom, there's a little kind of tag after that line where it cuts to black, which is what our ending was, where they added the babysitter's body being found outside the mortuary. We did not write that. The morticians were played by 2 of the producers from Outlaw Productions, and I don't know why that they felt they needed that, but that was
Yeah.
we didn't write that,
They
right?
needed some closure. They like, get her out of the ground right there. Get her out of the ground.
I'll also throw in, because this is a very screenwriterly, perspective, I guess, is like I said, it was our third script. Our second one, we had gotten to an agent through contacts that Neil had, because he was in the screenwriting program at UCLA. I was in the English department, who read it. It took like 6 months to read it. And basically we got a message that he thought it was cute and he wanted to see our next one. And the next one was the script that at the time was called The Real World, that became Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. And we thought, oh, he's willing to look at another script of ours. Let's finish it. So we finished it. And Neil, you want to pick up with the Marcy piece?
Well, a couple of things. One, so when we finished it, we thought it would take him another 6 months
Right.
to read it. So just bear that in mind. But before this agent said he was interested, one of my screenwriting professors had met him at a party, and he had said, do you have any, writers in any of your classes at UCLA who you can recommend? And she gave us the referral to this agent. But before that, we had been hip pocketed by an agent who was a very big TV agent at the time. Her name is Beth Uffner, and she represented mostly sitcom writers. And I had met her because I was interning at MGM Enterprises, which was Mary Tyler Moore's company. And she was handling us initially, but then she got too busy, and it was clear that we were very green and we didn't really have the material that we weren't at the caliber of her other clients. So she passed us down to an associate who she had hired. I don't remember her last name, but Tara and I have talked about her for decades now. Her first name was Marcy. And we got her, we had written a spec episode of The Golden Girls, and we'd written The Real World. We got Marcy both of those scripts, and she hated both of them. And she said specifically about The Real World, this script, this is terrible. We can't send this out. Just stick it in a drawer. Don't show it to anybody. She said this will actually harm your career, that you don't want anybody to see this. Yeah. And what we did, like Tara said, for those who are listening, who are aspiring to get their big break, what we did was we believed her. It was very easy for us to believe that it was bad, because we were nobodies and we didn't know. So we put it in a drawer for probably 6 months. Yeah. And David Kep, who I went to film school with, he was over at my apartment one day, and he asked whatever happened to that script, and he knows Tara, and I said, oh, actually, do you want to see? And I opened up my closet, and it was under a pair of shoes. It was printed, and it had been sitting there, and it was dusty. And he said, can I read it? And I said, no, you cannot read it. He said, why not? I said, because it's terrible. He said, how do you know? And I said, because this agent said it was terrible. So he said, just let me read it. I'm not going to, anyway, he read it that night, and he called and said, I think it's really funny. I think she's wrong, and I think you can sell it. And at this point, he was not, giant screenwriter David Kep. Yeah. But that was enough. He was so enthusiastic about it that we thought, all right, well, why don't we try? And then that was right around the same time that my professor had gotten us the contact of the new agent, who did not think we were terrible.
We dug out that script, and we thought, okay, let's take a chance. And I got in the car and I drove to the agency of the guy who had said our first script was cute, and maybe he'd look at another one. I handed it to his assistant. It was a Friday at 4:00, and on Sunday we got a phone call that he wanted to meet with us. And he loved the script. He signed it. He sent it out. He sold it to Fox. And this was 2 months after I graduated from UCLA. When it happened really quickly. But, there were several years before that when we were nights and weekends. Just
well,
writing.
Thank you guys for saying that, though, mentioning, we always take so much on what one person says or what one person's opinion is. And we always just have to remember that that's one person's opinion. It's not everybody's opinion. It's not global, just because, and also in contests, just because you don't win a contest doesn't mean you just got a reader that wasn't particularly into that, whatever it was, but you got to keep pushing it and get it out there to someone will like it.
Well, also just to add really fast that it wasn't just that one, basically everybody who read that script, and we're under no illusions. We know it's not Tootsie or Moonstruck or, you know, The Godfather, but
Paper
everybody
Moon,
who read that
Graduate.
script, I mean, we had meetings and like everybody loved the script. There was something about it that was very irreverent, and I don't know. It just caught fire. I mean, there was more, Fox bought it, but there was more than one studio even interested in it. And, you know, it was amazing. I mean, so it wasn't just one person who didn't like it or who hated it, but everybody who read it seemed to really respond to it.
As someone who didn't get my first writing gig until my 30s, I want to say how furious I am that you guys were in college when you sold your first feature. I'm going to jump off this call and throw my computer.
No. Me too. I'm out. So how much of the script, well, first let's talk about the name, since you guys touched on that it was originally called The Real World. Can you guys tell that story about, obviously you had to change the name because of the MTV show. Yeah. How did you come up with the new title?
All I remember, Neil, correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe they just made this up. We knew they wanted to change the title. We weren't coming up with anything good. And I have this memory that they convened a focus group of a bunch of 12-year-olds. And they came up with a few dozen, I don't know if this is true. They came up with several titles and gave them all to the 12-year-olds, and the 12-year-olds decided that they liked the title Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead.
That's
what I remember was that Warner Brothers, because HBO financed it and Warner Brothers released it, they distributed it. And what I remember is we got an email, well, no, this was before email. So we got a list of probably like 200 or 300 titles from Warner Brothers marketing from our producers. And basically it wasn't really our choice at that point, but they just said, what do you think? And then maybe Tara's right, like for whatever reason, Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead was the winner.
The winner.
And we were, at the time, we were horrified because it just didn't, I think we liked to think at the time, since our views have evolved since, but at the time we liked to think that we had written a really smart kind of teen comedy.
Sophisticated.
We thought, yes, exactly. So we just thought we felt like they had, maybe they were gearing the movie to a younger audience and they wanted it to be zanier than what we had originally pictured in terms of tone.
Right. And then, well, I love the title because I think it just...
We do now.
Yeah, I know. But back then, what are you like? You're like 17. I'm just kidding. You're like, what, 22 years old? It's like, you guys.
It was also a little ahead of its time as far as like having the title exemplify exactly what the story was. I know we as writers like to be a little bit more like, subtextual, subtle, with our titling. But like Wedding Crashers and Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, I mean, you guys were like 10 years ahead of that. So a tip of the cap to whomever came up with that. And again, good on you guys for proving it. And by the way, I love it so much, like I wouldn't even consider changing the title.
Okay.
Remake, why waste all the goodwill that you guys have generated? That would be crazy. Snakes on a plane.
And then how much of from your original script changed in filming? And then tell me about your involvement. Were you guys on set? I mean, obviously you were, because Tara was talking about wigs and stuff earlier. But can you guys talk about how much changed and then being there and kind of being part of the experience?
I mean, one thing I'll say is that there were never any other writers on it. Neil and I were the only writers ever to work on the project from start to finish. And to me, the biggest thing that changed in the development process was more kids. In the original draft, there were just 3 kids. It was Swell, Kenny, and Walter. And they wanted more kids. And so with each draft that we would do for them, we kept throwing another kid in. Other than that, I think it was a rather unusual case of the final product being very, very similar to the original script.
Well, except for the whole opening, remember? See, in our original script, the babysitter was kind of this sweet old lady. And they said, and we're not, who are we to argue at this point, but at the time, they said, no, if this sweet old lady dies, this nice old lady dies, it's going to be a drag and it's not going to be funny and it's going to be, so they wanted her to be really, just cruel. And so, and they were telling us very specifically that she had to be mean to the kids so that it's not that they killed her, but, you know, the grieving process is over in a matter of hours. And don't you remember, Tara, we got together because it was the one note that we just thought tonally it was going to become very, very broad. And the way we used to write together is we would take turns typing. And whoever was at the keyboard we'd discuss lines, and then whatever line we finally agreed would go in. Sometimes we'd put multiple lines. Sometimes we'd put, what is it, Carolyn? Something, because we didn't know what the line was. And then that line ended up staying in the movie. But anyway, I remember at the time, we both were like, I can't type it, you type it. Like, this is like, you know, because it was just much broader than the other parts of the movie. But it played really well. You know, when the Twilight Zone music plays and the babysitter turns and blows the whistle. I mean, we were in test screenings and people laughed. So, but anyway, that was not in the original script. That was very different. And then the other thing that was very different was that our version of corporate America at the time was that we wanted her to get a job at a big company, but she didn't ever really know what the company did. We called it a corporate non-entity. So she really didn't know what she did. And then so that was the other, you remember, Tara, because there were multiple drafts where what the company was changed. It was a vitamin company, it was a Cliff Notes company, it was I can't remember, but uniform fashion was the one that stuck.
Really?
So in regards to the fashion angle of the movie, where, you know, like all these wonderful uniforms that you turn into it, which to me, when I was younger watching it and watching it again, I mean, that stuff's kind of coming back, you guys. Hate to tell you, but it's kind of like I was looking at some of those outfits like, well, that's not so bad. I mean, I'm too old now, but I'm just saying. So when you guys settled on the fashion thing, tell me originally what it was. It was originally just a nondescript sort of like company. And then how did you turn it into the fashion thing? And how did that change a lot, or did you have sort of the groundwork?
I don't remember that transition all that much, but what I do remember is when we did decide on the fashion thing, the fact that it was that specific, you know, by making that specific choice, it opened up a lot of opportunity. You know, for Swell to do specific things, and visually, you know, we knew it was going to lend more interest, and it meant we could hone the dialogue, we could hone the jokes to more specificity. I mean, I think that sort of corporate non-entity idea, you know, might have worked really well for a half an hour show or something. I don't know that it would have sustained in a feature length film with the same kind of interest, with the same kind of texture. So I think once we landed on it, it fit Swell's character. It helped develop her in terms of her dreams, you know, thinking about maybe being in fashion someday. So it worked structurally for the plot, but it also, I think, worked to give Swell a little bit more complexity and dimension.
Do you call her Swell? Is that like your name for Sue Ellen? Is that your name for her?
That was
Swell?
Neil's.
I had a friend named, her nickname was Swell. But that's in the movie, they call her Swell. It ended up working out well for us because she had a double life.
Yeah.
And this way, you know.
She got away with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's talk about how this movie became a cult classic, and how often do you guys hear these lines that I say, the dishes are done, man, like all the time.
Every time I finish the dishes, I say the dishes are done.
Right. Or I think it in my head if I don't say it out loud. But when you guys were writing this, were you thinking about these lines, or were these just lines? No. And then they kind of later were like, what the hell?
What the hell?
Well, I mean, the dishes are done, man. From what I remember, we were very aware, and this is going to sound like we were really pandering, but we weren't. We were just huge movie buffs. I mean, we went to the movies, you know, the way we watch TV now, we went to the movies constantly. And we didn't mention this, but we went to elementary, what was called junior high, high school, and UCLA together almost the entire time, even though I'm a year older. So we'd known each other forever, and we had all the same references, and we'd seen all these movies. I think that we love coming attractions. And we even went to Paris once, and you'd go to the seance. You'd arrive at the movie theater early to see the trailers.
Yeah.
Because it was like Super Bowl commercials. And so I do remember we said, that's going to go in the trailer. We knew that throwing the dishes and shooting them we knew that was in the trailer. When Kenny's buying groceries at the grocery store and he says, I've got a double coupon for that. We were like cutting the trailer in our head with some of those moments. Not I'm right on top of that rose. That became the other line that people say. But some of what we called set pieces were like, oh, this is probably going to be in the trailer. And we were dreaming really big, even though at the time we wanted to open up a checking account for our nascent screenwriting corporation. And we were joking that the service charges that the bank would charge for the account would bankrupt the company because we didn't make any money. And but we did think I think we were dreamers. I know.
I don't think we ever dreamed, cult classic. I honestly don't know, how that happens, why something catches fire like that. And the lines of dialogue. I was telling Neil a story earlier today, and this sort of exemplifies the last 30 years of this happening. I was at a party probably about 15 years ago, and a guy was walking from one part of the room to the other room. And as he walked by me, he turned to talk to the guys he was standing with and said, I'm right on top of that rose. And I didn't know him. It was so bizarre. On his way back, I stopped him and I said, that sounds really familiar. And he said, oh, it's from the best movie ever made. And, the guy had to be 30 years old. And he just went off about what a great movie it was. And, I let him gush. And then I said, that's really interesting because I co-wrote that movie. And, it was like he was meeting royalty. It's bizarre. I don't know.
Tara, that's like every writer's dream, to be standing at a party and someone just says a line and you're like, excuse me, what was that again? Say that again. Yeah. That's amazing. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears for a second. We're going to go to Chuck and talk to you a little bit, and then we're going to talk about the reboot. So Chuck, will you just talk a little bit about your beginnings, how you got started as a screenwriter, TV writer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. So it was not as early as Tara and Neil, unfortunately. I came up as an assistant in Hollywood. So right after I graduated from Syracuse, I moved out here, started working at production companies, and then I started working on TV shows as like a PA and an assistant and everything. And so I just kind of worked my way up, and while I was doing that, I was networking a lot with other assistants, and they kind of connected me with people that could represent me. So I got representation before I got a job. So they were able to send me out on meetings and everything like that. And ironically, I was working at HBO in business affairs, and my boss was the executive on Don't Tell Mom, Babysitter's Dead. So I actually had a Don't Tell Mom folder behind my desk, and I was like, I love this movie. Oh my God, this is one of my favorite movies from growing up. And then later that year, I got my first TV writing job, and I've been working in TV for about 5 years before I sold my first movie script, and then second movie script, and then I worked on Dear White People, and I'm trying to go as fast as I can here. There's a lot of stuff in between, but Dear White People and WandaVision, Mixed Dish recently, and now I'm working on this. I just turned in the outline last week, so I'm waiting for the producers to give me.
How did this come about? How did it come about?
Oh yeah, so the original producers from the movie are also producers on this, along with this gentleman, Oren, from Motion Picture. I'm completely blanking on the company right now, so sorry. Oren Siegel is his name. So they decided to put together a remake and do a black version of it. They worked with Billy Woodruff, who's a director. Billy and I are at the same agency, so I guess they connected, and he was like, hey, how about Chuck? So we met. They brought me in, and I went into the meeting. I told them this. I was like, okay, guys, I've never prepared less for a meeting in my entire life. Like, I know this movie from front to back. I know all the words. Like, ask me anything. Like, I know this movie. I love this movie. Let's talk about how to just update it. And the main two things that we discussed updating, it was like, technology has advanced a lot, and then what does making it black really mean? What is the differences between this happening to a black family and this happening to a white family? And after a bunch of conversations between Billy and me and Oren, and it just kind of came up where and I guess I can share this. One of the lines that I used, because when you're pitching to financiers or studios or whatever, you add jokes in there just to sort of get them on board with the tone of the material. So I went in and I was saying, you know, it's a black family. And so Kenny says to the siblings, like, hey, we have a dead white woman in our house. People have been lynched for much less. And so that sort of became like my way into the story, which was like, for a white family, this is kind of like, okay, we can just put this aside and move on. But for a black family, like knowing what the criminal justice system, how it disproportionately affects people of color, that paranoia, and very, you know, real paranoia, is alive and well throughout the movie, but especially like the first act becomes extended in a way that, you know, the removing the babysitter from the picture is more of a meal, if that makes sense. So, and by the way, we came up with this last, I want to say summer, maybe. It's been a while. It took a long time for the deals to close. But so, and didn't realize obviously how apropos to the times it would be. You know, we're looking forward to being able to really like make those statements about, hey, this is, adolescence is hard enough, and then when you're forced to be an adult, and when you have a potential criminal record in your future for something you haven't done. So
what's it like, what's the difference for you writing something original versus doing sort of a reboot of a concept that's already out there? Like, is it more pressure? Is it easier? Is it more difficult?
It would probably be less pressure if I didn't love the original so much. Like if I was remaking something that I didn't have a lot of attachment to, I would be like, oh, I'll just, you know, fucking change this and that and blah, 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 and boom, we're done. Here's the script in a week and a half. But because of two things, because I have such reverence for the original, and because I think the new take on it is really important to delve into, especially with comedy, because I don't think we're going to see a lot of people deal with that in a comedic way. It's taken me longer than writing an original thing, which I'm usually a relatively fast writer. And so this has been a new experience, but I'm okay with taking the time with it because I think it deserves it.
And Neil and Tara, how have you guys been involved in this reboot? Does Chuck call you and ask for advice, or are you guys just sitting back and going like, yay, it's exciting?
Our involvement is to applaud. I mean, at this point, I mean, the dishes are in very good hands.
Yeah.
That's well,
we're overjoyed.
Yeah, I told them too, like there are some of those iconic lines that I will definitely work into the remake, because I would be a fool not to. And I think it's what the audience really wants. And I think like introducing that type of humor to a new audience is really, I think, essential. I think it bridges the gap generationally in a really cool way. And also I was talking to Neil about this a couple weeks ago. There was like a little banter back and forth between Brian and Sue right when they're breaking up. When I think he says, you know, I wouldn't be so secretive if you didn't ask so many questions. And she says, I would tell you more if you didn't want to know so much. And I was like, that's the kind of back and forth that I will keep alive like throughout this story, because I think that's what really excites me about language and excites me about the way that people interact with each other, especially under really heightened circumstances.
Nice. What about, and you don't have to go into detail about this with the, you know, because you have secrets that you have to keep, but in terms of technology, you know, for writers writing in the current state of the world with so much technology available to be in contact with everybody multiple ways, how are you tackling that in this new concept?
I do want to save that because there are some fun little set pieces involving technology. But I will just say it is much more of a specter over them, for good and for bad. Like it at first is a hindrance, and then it becomes a help. So
cool.
That's vague, but still I think gets to what you were asking.
I like that. And okay, so let's do a couple fun things. When Tara and Neil and Chuck and I first had a conversation, they were talking about that there's some trivia out there on IMDb that may or may not be correct. So I pulled some up from IMDb, and I wanted to just read these, and then you guys can tell me if these are true or not, and either debunk or we'll tell IMDb they're right. Okay, so the original script was written with Winona Ryder in mind for the role of Sue Ellen, but she turned it down as she was working on Edward Scissorhands and Mermaids. And then Justine Bateman was later cast, but then left the project, and then it went to Christina Applegate. Is that correct?
Not really. I mean, it's half correct, because we saw some of the other trivia that some of it we're going, where did that come from? Winona Ryder was never, I don't think she was who we had in mind at the time, but I'm not even sure that she was ever cast or it even went to her. I don't know if it got that far. That's just who we pictured. When 20th Century Fox bought it, Justine Bateman had an overall deal there. It was at the same time she was on Family Ties, and Michael J. Fox had become a movie star with Secret of My Success and, of course, Back to the Future. So I think they thought she was going to have a movie career. So it was being developed specifically for her through her production company. Mm-hmm. And then she decided not to do it. And then the script went into turnaround, and it sat, I don't know, maybe a year or two. At this point, I mean, we went from that first agent, ultimately, it's crazy because, and we were young and we couldn't believe a lot of these things were happening. So right. At this point, we'd been signed by CAA, and the head of literary motion picture was our agent. I mean, she represented these huge people. So we had like projects stacked up. So when it went into turnaround, we weren't even necessarily heartbroken because we were really busy, and we were in demand for a minute. Then suddenly we got a call saying that the producers who had made Sex, Lies, and Videotape, Outlaw Productions, that they were interested, and they just wanted us to come to a meeting. We went. We really, really liked them. They were fantastic. They're great. I'm saying past tense because I think 2 out of the 3 have passed away. But we love them, and they basically said, we want to attach ourselves and get involved, but we think the script needs some work. Would you be willing to do some work on it, on spec? We didn't get paid at that point, and then they were happy, and then one of our producers got it, was friends with Ed O'Neill, and that's how Christina Applegate got it. He actually handed it to her backstage at Married with Children when they were taping one night. And she really liked it, and then she went to her
And so she makes the movie. I mean,
totally.
she is so good in it, yeah. And I think she brought it to a whole new level. And so, yay, Christina Applegate.
I think it was probably a huge turning point in her career too, because all we'd really seen her before as is Kelly Bundy, and I think this showed so much more range on her part. She had so much more to do. And I like, she's nominated this year for the
antithesis to Kelly Bundy. I mean,
it couldn't be further away.
Is so smart and so together, and it was, in a way, it was a really smart career choice for her to go so different.
It's interesting too how Tara and I have talked about this, because we both love Dead to Me, and there are certain shots and certain moments in Dead to Me that are right out of the movie. There's actually, they hide a body, and there's a shot with rubber gloves slamming a trunk, I think. I think Christina Applegate must like, really dark comedy. because Linda Cardellini and Christina Applegate were not the original actors that Liz Feldman had in mind when she was writing it. They were cast after the fact. So, but we were, Christina Applegate definitely exceeded our expectations.
Let's debunk more rumors.
Okay. So here's a good one. In one of the earlier script drafts, the babysitter's death was supposed to be a more elaborate storyline. The Crandall children were all suspects, and they all had their reasons to kill her. Although certain scenes were scaled down, elements of their motives remain in the final cut of the film. Walter having to do a book report, Melissa forced to wear a dress, and Zach losing Cynthia.
Nope. Never at any time. Nope. Not at all. I don't know where that came from.
There's no sources, so we'll just tell IMDb, take that in. Okay, then the last one. is John Landis was the first choice to direct this film, but he turned it down as the story didn't interest him. John Hughes was also asked to direct, but he turned it down because he only directed scripts that he wrote himself. And then there was Joe Dante, Richard Donner, Amy Heckerling, Chris Columbus, John Badham, and Joel Schumacher also turned it down. I mean, did everybody turn this down? Silly.
I remember there was a director's list. I think that once Christina was interested, we were told that if one of 5 directors who were on this list agreed to do it, we would have a green light. And Stephen Herrick, who had done Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, was one of the names, and he said yes. I don't remember who the other ones were, or if, I really don't.
That's
Do you?
all
I
need.
mean, I can't remember, but honestly, it sounds crazy because it's been so many decades now, but we had a lot of projects where there were directors lists being made. And so I just don't remember this one, like those names.
Right, like going down the list, like, oh, so-and-so turned it down. Oh, and so-and-so turned it down. So-and-so turned it down. It's like every, come on, guys. That's so funny. Okay, so there are a few questions in the Q&A that I'm gonna throw at you guys, and there's not too many, so I think we can get through them. I will just read them just for the sake of time. This one's for you, Chuck. Aaron W. is asking you, for Chuck, I developed a TV series, wrote the pilot, and outlined all the episodes. It's Tootsie meets Soul Man, about a white man taking the identity of his Black best friend in order to work in a diversity-conscious industry. I'm wondering if the zeitgeist for this very edgy show with the BLM movement and social protests going on now might not be the right timing for this. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's tricky. That's a real tough one right now. I mean, I think not right now. That's a tough one pretty much anytime post Soul Man. I don't think that's looked at with great reverence in retrospect. Yeah, anything involving, it's essentially blackface, I'd steer clear of that, which I know that's a huge part of your thing, so I hate to, poo-poo the whole thing. I can't imagine a scenario in which that is gonna get any traction right now. Sorry.
I think that's kind of what he wanted to, know, just the truth. So this is from Virginia. How much control will the writer of the new script, Chuck, have over the final production? Will that be a collaborative process with producers also? I mean, that's kind of the dream. Neil and Tara had this experience where you guys were the only writers on the project, and then you were there. And I mean, that's just something that doesn't happen as much now. So how much are you going to be involved, Chuck?
That depends. So, featured, movies, they're more of a director's medium. So it's usually at the director's discretion, how much or how little involved he or she wants the writer to be. I hope that I'm the only writer on this remake. And I will defer to Billy Woodruff, our director. If he wants me there, I'd love to be there. I'd love to help out and, pitch new jokes that come up in the moment and have some fun like that. But I know a lot of directors don't love having the writer there in movies. So I would, again, it's up to him, but he and I are working very closely in the development of the script. So I think, I mean, again, I'd love to. We'll see what he feels the most comfortable with.
Cool. I hope you do.
Thanks.
Joe VB is asking about the animation at the beginning of the movie. He says it seemed mean and didn't capture the sensibility of the film. Can you guys talk about where that came from?
We had nothing to do with it. I remember, did they show it to us before a test screening, Tara? Or did we see it for
No,
the first time?
we were sitting there and it was the first test screening and it came on and we just looked at each other like,
Yeah.
no, don't do this.
Well, I remember doing
It's
that.
very short, fortunately.
But then as soon as it went from the animation to Christina in the vintage clothing store, the audience just started cheering because they loved her so much.
Mm-hmm.
And Tara leaned over to me and said, "This movie is brilliant." Because we got so caught up. We was at a shopping mall in West Covina or something, and they were so excited, and we just were like, everything's fine. We were just so excited.
Well, this just popped into my brain. Will you guys please tell me that at the end of the movie, when we don't see any more things happening, that the assistant job went to the poor girl in sales who was doing the QED reports?
Kathy?
Yes. Did you just say that she got the assistant job? Can you just tell me that?
Oh, Chuck.
I know this movie, man. I'm telling you.
She was on
Wow.
Twin Peaks. That was Kimmy Robertson. She
Yeah.
was like, that was a really exciting casting choice. I remember
Yeah.
that.
I think I just felt like when I rewatched it, I was like, I feel like that was me when I was younger. Just like, I'll do it. Oh, thank you so much for the opportunity. It's like, she better get that assistant job. She better get it at the end. And I was like waiting. I'm like, oh no, you didn't wrap it up. I guess that's a no. She stayed in sales. Okay. Philip Henry's asking, was anything cut from the final film that you wish had stayed in? He says, I always hoped the car thief drag queens would reappear and wondered if there was any further scenes with them. I was wondering that too. It's a good question, Philip.
Well, I can do quick things. The drag queen stealing a car actually happened to a friend of mine. And that was one that we filed away and said, we have to use this in something. And then we had the opportunity, and what are we gonna say? Liza Minnelli stole our car. We thought was funny at the time. There was one in editing, I don't remember the order and it's too tedious to go into it, but the way that it was written in the original script, Sue Ellen was not that sloppy about leaving her wallet with her ID in her desk while she was not there. We were very careful that would not happen. And we were really upset. That was the one thing we fought about, saying no, but it makes her look sloppy, and we didn't, and the director said, nobody's gonna care. At that point, it's a sprint. We're just heading into the fashion show. And in retrospect, I think he was probably right, because I don't think anybody cared at that point. But to us, we were like, no, it made her look like, like she dropped the ball.
I think the only other thing that got adjusted in the editing was more of Swell's relationship, her friendship with Rose, got trimmed down a lot. That relationship was really important to us. And those scenes tended to get truncated a little bit, just for time, to condense it a little bit. But yeah.
But can I actually add to that? Because Neil shared another thing with me. I was talking about how in rewatching it, I was like, oh my God, this girl is smoking in front of her mother. And I was like, oh my mother would beat the shit out of me if that. And Neil said that there was, I guess I can let you tell, you're here.
Wait a minute, let me light up. No, yeah, but that was actually what we used to call a character arc, where
Used to call?
Yes.
her mom,
I think that term is still used.
She changes. She quit smoking.
There was a point where she said she quit smoking, and there was a line where she said to her mother, "I guess I gave up my rebellious streak," and the point was that she did quit, because that was. But yeah, so that we didn't like that. That's true. That was really upsetting to us. Actually, we're both vehemently anti-cigarettes, so especially for teenagers.
Interesting. Okay, I have a couple more questions and then we're going to wrap up, and I'm going to let you guys give some final words or advice to emerging screenwriters. So think on that. I'm just going to ask this last one, and I'm just reading the question. Tony's asking, how do you experience writing and the business as somewhat older writers?
Tara?
I'm not in the industry anymore. I write novels and short stories where your age is not quite as involved. So back to Chuck and Neil. Well, Chuck is young.
Do you guys
Chuck's
feel like
very
that young. In screenwriting? Do you feel like you have to be somewhat younger?
Not necessarily. I mean, what happened for me? What I did was early on, I had opportunities internationally before the business was really global. And so I started to consult and be the American on the team for movies that were going to be sold to a global market, particularly animated movies, because you can shoot them. They all, I have 3 animated movies in production right now. And one of them is part 3 of a franchise that's become very successful. And it has to be done in English, no matter what. So that in that case of that one, the animation studio is in Madrid. So that's kept me, you know, I've never stopped working because I started to look at the whole world as the marketplace. And now it really is, you know, I have a project that we're going to do at Netflix, and you know what I mean? Like, so I didn't really know, but I went where opportunities seem to be, and it's been really fulfilling, and I enjoy it.
Nice. Chuck, I meant to ask you, will you talk a little bit about working on Mixed-ish and Dear White People, and how that has helped you, or you know, especially with how the world is today? I mean, now both of those seem to be very timely. Not that they weren't before, but just at the forefront. But can you talk about working on both of those shows and how they've shaped you?
Yeah, sure. I'll start with Dear White People. That was, I mean, I learned so much on that show just about politics, about, you know, sort of the new language that was emerging around race relations and cancel culture and all this, like, things I just wasn't aware of. And I was an African American studies minor in college, so like I thought I was pretty hip to everything. But just since I graduated, you know, 18 years ago, there's been so much change. But ironically, there has not been a huge change in the experience of Black students at majority white colleges. So all the writers, we sort of were able to share our experiences. Some were from 20 years ago, some were from 30 years ago, and they all sort of seemed as relevant to, you know, 2-3 years ago when the show came out as they were when we experienced them. So it was sad in that regard that not more progress had been made, and that, you know, there's the impression that every generation gets a little bit more tolerant and gets a little bit more exposed to everything, a little bit more worldly. And while they do get more tolerant, more liberal, they don't necessarily get exposed to, on a real level, people of other ethnicities. They get exposed to media portrayals or social media posts, and those are obviously all heavily curated and heavily biased. Not necessarily, you know, sinister bias, but just people's inherent bias. So they're not real representation. So there's still that culture clash when people have come together and are forced to share the same space. And so I think that's what it really taught me, was how to put voice to, and how to, like, make sure that while you're entertaining people, while you're being satirical, while you're, just making fun programming, that you're also saying something, that you're also moving the needle for an issue that means something to you. So that it definitely taught me that. And Mixed-ish, I'd say pretty much the same thing. Like that's also about cultures coming together, entering it with different stereotypes, and then having those stereotypes disproven, and kind of confronting, you know, whatever racist or prejudiced feelings that we each have within us in a comedic way. Like, so I guess in that way, it harkened back to the Norman Lear shows that I was talking about before. It sort of had that same vibe to it. So I felt very, like, honored to work on that show as well. And I try to bring the lessons I learned on those shows into this remake for sure, because I just, like, I don't know, like I said, I'm putting a ton of pressure on myself to make this as good as the original, because it meant so much to me, you know? Sorry, I don't mean to kiss up to you guys so much. I'm just, you know,
it's no Dear White People, Chuck. Let's be,
hey,
you know, let's be
man.
honest here.
Well, we'll combine. There you go.
Chuck,
this is
Don't tell the Dear White People that the Babysitter.
Yeah. How old was I?
How old were you when you first saw this movie? And did it stick with you, or did you watch it later?
No. So it came out in '91. I was 11 that year, and I remember watching the first season of The Real World on MTV. So that's like, it's an interesting juxtaposition for me. So when as soon as it came out on HBO ran it like around the clock almost, and so I would watch it pretty much every time it came on. So I'd say that's like I was 12, and I watched it every single time I saw that it popped up. And my sister and I watched it. We still quote, you know, the movie together to this day. So yeah, it had a really formative effect on me, because it kind of taught me that lesson earlier, that, like, I know you want to hurry up and be older, but it's not as fun as it looks. So just sort of enjoy it, and don't let youth be wasted on the young. And so I got that from it even as a kid. So I appreciate you guys for giving me that prescience.
Nice. Okay, so let's do some final thoughts. Do you guys have any specific advice or anything that you want to tell to emerging screenwriters or people that are on the verge of maybe breaking in or making their first deal? What do you guys
Don't listen
say?
to Marcy. That's my
Right, exactly. No Marcy's.
Yeah.
Chuck, we can start with you.
Oh, I think just write as much as possible, and be thoughtful and be intentional with your writing, but don't be so precious with it that you never show it to anyone. And try to produce as much as possible. Because like Neil and Tara were saying, they were like, their professor said, hey, this script was cute, what else do you have? So whenever anybody else asks you what else you have, you want to have something to give them. And I think write what is closest to your heart, right? Not necessarily, people say write what you know, and I think people misinterpret that to be like only write things that you have experienced directly.
Yeah.
But I think it's write what you're passionate about. Because if I'm passionate about, B-1 bombers, I've never flown one, but like the research that I could do on that would make me as passionate about the project and would make it, just kind of flow out of me in a way that people would probably respond to. So yeah, just write a lot and write about what you're passionate about.
Yeah, I write what you want to know.
Mm-hmm.
Follow the question. If there isn't a question motivating you or sort of moving you forward, it's then you're just making a statement, and it's didactic, and there's always got to be a question and a curiosity, I think, fueling writing the story, because you are trying to figure something out. You're trying to find out something about life, about these characters, et cetera, et cetera. So I think finding the question that so intrigues you that you have to keep exploring it in order to come to an answer is the sort of life force. It's, like the pulse behind any writing project. For me, Neil?
Brilliant advice from both of you. I would just say, don't respect your comfort zones. When you're writing, if you're uncomfortable and you're thinking, is this too bold? Is this too provocative? What are people going to think? Don't cut it. I think when people are, if you look at some of the best shows, look at Watchmen, look at Dead to Me, look at Fleabag. These are, you cringe a lot, you're uncomfortable, and yet you can't stop watching, and it's, the characters are excruciatingly vulnerable. So I encourage people to not be afraid of the discomfort and allow your characters to be excruciatingly vulnerable, because then you'll have empathy. Probably the thing I say the most to my students is, we're not in the entertainment business, we're in the empathy business. So that's mine.
That's good. I'm going to write that one down. That kind of made me think of one more final question. So the world is a change-in, we like to say, and we're all getting more aware. And I know, sorry, I'm getting a little punchy now. What is your guys' advice on writing diversity? So if you would like to expand yourself and not just write someone who looks like you, what is your advice to do that? Should you reach out to somebody? If you're trying to write a, Latinx character, should you reach out to somebody? What's your advice on doing that? On expanding diversity-wise in your own writing?
For me, 100%, I always reach out to people, because empathy is about understanding, and help me understand what this feels like. I think right now in the Black Lives Matter movement that seems to never be ending, the most important thing is as far as I'm concerned, is to listen. And I don't, and to, there's a profound humility to listening to somebody's experience. And so I couldn't write it authentically based on my limited experience. So I'd either want to partner with somebody who does really know, or I'd have to talk to a lot of people, part of the research.
Or promote somebody else telling their story. Absolutely. Instead of, asking yourself, is this my story to tell? Or is my energy better spent helping somebody else, promoting them, giving them feedback, whatever it is, to tell their own story.
Very much. Absolutely.
Yeah, I actually had someone reach out to me yesterday for that very that very thing, and my advice would be, if you're reaching out to somebody to gain their expertise on something or their perspective on something, you know, tread lightly, be kind of humble with it, because a lot of people, especially now, a lot of Black people I've spoken to are like, it's not my job to teach white people
Right.
what our experience is or what our lives are like. So they're right to think that. They're right to, you know, it's not necessarily their responsibility. I personally like the open exchange of ideas a little bit more, and I think that like sharing with people who are curious is a good way to, you know, spread some of those ideas and get them to people via a person that they might listen to a little bit easier or a little bit more easily than they would listen to me. So I am usually willing to do that, but again, tread lightly, don't kind of expect too much, and don't expect to come out of that conversation being like, I get Blackness. Like that's
Right.
it. Just sort of like it helps you to like first of all, the fact that you're asking means that you want to know, and that you'll probably take the care that it deserves at writing outside your experience level. So, but yeah, it's a sensitive sort of subject, but I do like that people are making the effort.
Yes. Well, and you know, quick PS, Damon Lindelof had not heard of Tulsa 21, and Watchmen was made not because of him, but in spite of him. And his entire writer's room were people of color, and he had to listen. And it was a major collaboration. But, you know, I'm glad that he decided to take Watchmen in that direction, and then, you know, had a room that reflected inclusion and diversity. It had to. You couldn't have told the story otherwise.
Yeah, I'd also like to add to that, because like I was fortunate enough to grow up in a very diverse situation. So I had, you know, friends and family members of all different ethnicities, and so I like would encourage people. I mean, don't go out shopping for a token friend of any ethnicity, but like just look at ways in your life that you can sort of make inroads and like expand your circle, so that you do have a little bit more access to diverse ideas, and you're not having to interview people. You're basing it on your experience, and I feel like it helps you grow as a writer, but it also just helps you mature and be more well-rounded as a human.
Right. Excellent. I mean, I don't think we can end any better than that. So thank you all very much for joining us to do this conversation. It brought me a lot of joy to watch the movie again and remember all those feelings I had when I was a preteen. And just so much inspiration, and it makes me so happy that the three of you are just genuinely nice people. And, you know, above anything else, that I'm super happy, Chuck, that you're doing this reboot, because you're not just someone who's going to take the idea and change it. Like, you're a lover of this movie. So that makes me really happy, and I'm very excited to see what comes of that. I'll be watching. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.